Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Um, Today, I'm highlighting things that are considered normal because the question that we are asking ourselves everywhere is what is normal? What is the new normal? I think there are these two press releases that are significant in discerning what is the pulse of our times today. Deliberately using the word pulse, though the science of the times is more appropriate. The pulse of the times, since it's to do with health, and health is something that touches us alike, and that is the commonality that holds the entire world now. That's why there are these two press releases that I would like to highlight, suggesting that we are continuing to live abnormal lives. The first release is from the WHO chief, who has warned that the present pandemic is not the end. We are saying that as soon as the vaccine is founded, everything will be okay, and then we are back to what we were, though supposedly in new normal terms. But this pandemic, the WHO is suggesting, is not the end and has asked the world to be prepared for another one. If this is just the beginning, is it perhaps just the beginning? The second press release is far more problematic in that Oxfam has highlighted that the world's wealthiest countries, representing just about 13% of the world's population, has already cornered more than half, that is 51% or more, of the promised doses of that is leading to the COVID-19 vaccine candidate, which means that we have seen this consistent hoarding of medical equipment and also access to medical interventions. And that is why these two releases are important. And from this perspective, I would like to highlight certain aspects as to whether this is indeed normal at all. That's why it's a challenge for Christian discipleship to be, in terms of responsible citizenship, that requires that every societal trend is analyzed, especially in healthcare, because that is at the heart of our discussion, especially in this pandemic. And that's why, what is the new emerging normal? What is this new normal? Or more properly put, what is the character of the emerging new abnormal in our own context? Because in many ways, this what this pandemic has done is it has stripped and laid bare the very deep structural fault lines of a world, and this has brought to it to the fore yet again. Because as we have enumerated that empire takes forever new abnormal forms that are strategically normalized and legitimized as the quote unquote the new normal. And therefore, I plead for far more carefulness if we have to use the word the new normal. Therefore, this danger of familiarity needs to be addressed over and over again. Another thing that has happened, especially in terms of the way in which we have viewed health, in terms of privileged and underprivileged, is that privilege now has a claim to vulnerability. Because as the death toll in powerful countries mounts, perhaps due to lack of precautions, we are hearing how people are flaunting rules, just in this false notion of power, that though ironically having access to precautions, since these death tolls are rising, now privilege takes stakes claim to vulnerability. And when such forms of vocabularies of vulnerability and marginalization become somehow diluted and self-directed, to the extent that the spectrum of justice dissolves into a very unifocal, highly individualized survival enterprise. And we are back to the Enlightenment days, back to um, uh, the early 18th century, where such forms of individualism had given rise to a highly capitalistic form of organization everywhere. And that's why, is it a new situation wherein which new forms of empires will take control, is something that we are to be careful of and be attentive to. And therefore, this entire hoarding of medical equipment, hoarding of vaccines, hoarding of resources, of all suitable health interventions, are legitimized as the public concern of one's own individuals' aspirations. And that's why each country, certainly powerful, and that's why the Oxfam report is important for us in trying to discern how this has pointedly become a highly individualistic affair, though it is supposedly a pandemic. What is the meaning of this prefix pan is something that we have to think about. And therefore, we have to use certain concepts, at least using Joan Layard's concept of unstory. What are these unstories that are not narrated? And Sione would push this forward, saying, what are these hidden transcripts? Thank you, Sione, for that word. What are these hidden transcripts that we are to painfully unpack, which is closeted and conveniently shut away from this big healthcare discourse, where in which lives are to be preserved? Certainly, yes. But to what extent and how? Is hoarding a way of doing so, wherein which vulnerable communities of the global south and elsewhere, especially in India, the Dalits, the Adivasis, the tribals, the displaced ones, the migrant persons, they are desubjugated. And what Foucault was speaking about as the desubjugation of the subject in this play of the politics of truth is becoming more and more obvious. And finally, just one point, if I do have time, Michael, can I make just a last suggestion? Yeah, thank you. And that's why, what is the theology of our times that we are to perceive in the context of this legitimization of the new normal and pathologization of the most vulnerable communities, especially women, where these COVID-19 diagnostic labels and fraudulent COVID certificates are used in order to target the most vulnerable people in our own communities, especially taking recourse to adverse mental health acts, wherein which because individuals are pushed to the margins because of their own mental health situations, this is being adversely used. And that is why, what is the theology, what is the challenge to theology in this quote unquote new abnormal? Health is not a static possession, but a life-giving orientation in the midst of change and challenge. And just as the divine image finds expression in relationships, health is both rooted in and productive of these life-giving relationships. These convictions carry important and challenging aspects, wherein which a discourse, as I've said often, this discourse of mutuality and vulnerability, as Amos Young beautifully put this, is one way of moving forward. And possibly in the Q&A, we would have time for that. Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Over to you.